The city was always noisy, filled with cars honking, people rushing, and street vendors calling out to anyone who would listen. But amidst all the chaos, there was a girl who seemed invisible. She walked through the streets every morning with her head slightly down, her hair falling over her face like a curtain that kept the world away. People passed her without a second glance. They were too busy, too occupied with their own lives, to notice the quiet girl who carried a small, worn backpack and wore clothes that had seen better days. She moved slowly, carefully avoiding puddles from the previous night's rain. Her shoes were old, the soles almost completely worn out, but she never complained. She had learned early on that complaining didn't make life easier. Life had taught her that people rarely stopped to help, and so she learned to rely on herself. Every step she took seemed deliberate, measured, like she was moving through a world that had no space for her. At school, it was no different. She sat at the back of the classroom, keeping her notebook open, pretending to write notes, though sometimes her pen just rested on the paper as she stared out of the window. Other students whispered and laughed with their friends, sharing stories and secrets, but she remained on the edge of it all. Teachers gave her passing grades, never bothering to ask if she needed help or why she was so quiet. It was easier for everyone to ignore her, to assume she didn't belong, than to reach out and understand. Her days followed a predictable pattern. She woke up early in a small, dimly lit room she shared with her grandmother. Her grandmother was old, frail, and often sick. So the girl learned to take care of her, to prepare their meager breakfast, and make sure there was water for her medicine. It wasn't an easy life, but she never complained. She had learned to move quietly, to not demand too much from the world, because the world rarely gave anything in return. On her way to school, she passed the same streets every day. She saw the same shopkeepers arranging their goods, the same construction workers carrying heavy loads, and the same people rushing to catch buses. But no one ever looked at her. It was like she was part of the background, part of the scenery that people ignored. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like if someone actually noticed her, if someone smiled at her or spoke to her. But then she would shake her head and keep walking. People didn't notice her, and maybe that was just the way things were. One morning, as she walked through a narrow alley, she noticed a man pushing a garbage cart. He was older, his face lined with years of hard work, and his hands were rough and calloused. Unlike the other people she passed, he didn't hurry past her. He looked up from his work and caught her eye for a brief moment. There was something in the way he looked at her that was different. It wasn't judgment or annoyance, the way others sometimes looked when she accidentally brushed past them. It was simple recognition, as if he saw her for who she was. Even if just for a second, she quickly looked away, embarrassed that she had been caught staring, though she wasn't even really staring. It was just the first time in a long time that someone had looked at her and didn't immediately look away. She continued walking, her pace quickening, but the image of the man lingered in her mind. There was a kindness in his eyes, a quiet patience that made her feel, even for a moment, that maybe not everyone in the world ignored people like her. At school, the day was just like any other. She sat quietly, listening to the teacher's instructions, but rarely participating. The other students didn't seem to notice her, or if they did, they didn't care. During lunch, she ate alone, carefully unwrapping the small sandwich her grandmother had packed for her. She watched the other students laughing and sharing food, and sometimes a small pang of longing hit her chest. She wanted to be part of that world, but she didn't know how. She had always been alone. Being alone felt safer than trying and failing to fit in. After school, she walked the same streets again, heading home. The city was busier now, the streets filled with people heading to markets, buses, or their homes. She moved quietly among them, her eyes down, avoiding bumping into anyone. But then she saw the garbage man again. He was lifting a heavy bag into his cart, his back bent, but he looked up when he noticed her. This time, he gave her a small nod and a brief smile. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant something to her. She nodded back, almost imperceptibly, and continued walking. That night, she sat by the dim light of their small kitchen, preparing her grandmother's dinner. She thought about the man. She had never spoken to him, and maybe she never would. But there was something about that acknowledgement, that recognition, that stayed with her. It was like a small crack in the wall she had built around herself. She had learned to be invisible. to blend into the background, but maybe, just maybe, there were people in the world who could see her even. When she tried not to be seen, her grandmother coughed softly from the other room, reminding her to bring the water for her medicine. She moved quickly, fetching it, and made sure her grandmother was comfortable. Life was quiet, routine, and often lonely, but she had learned to accept it. Still, that small moment of connection during her walk stayed with her as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. It gave her a sense of hope, a tiny flicker that maybe things could be different, that someone out there could care, even just a little. The next morning, she walked the same route again, her backpack on her shoulders, her shoes worn but steady. She kept her eyes down as always, but part of her looked forward to seeing the man again. When she did, he was there, pushing his cart along the same street, moving with the same careful rhythm. He looked up, and this time he waved. She hesitated, then gave a small wave back. It was awkward and quiet, but it was an exchange, tiny conversation without words, and it made her heart beat a little faster. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not in a grand way, not with gifts or praise, but simply by acknowledgement, by recognition. She walked on, carrying that small warmth with her through the rest of the day. The city was still loud, still busy, and still filled with people who didn't notice her. But now, there was one person who did, and that was enough to make the world feel slightly less heavy, and so her days continued. She moved through the city quietly, often unnoticed, but now with a small hope tucked inside her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her feel like maybe, just maybe, the world had room for someone like her after all. The silent girl who everyone passed by was beginning to realize that even in a world full of indifference, small acts of kindness could make a difference, and sometimes the smallest gestures could change everything. The days slowly passed, each morning blending into the next, but something had started to change for the quiet girl. The small acknowledgement from the garbage man had planted a tiny seed of hope inside her, one she had never felt before. She began to notice things she hadn't paid attention to: the sound of birds in the early morning, the way the sunlight hit the windows of the shops, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery she always passed but never entered. Life still felt hard, still lonely at times, but there was a small light that made her mornings slightly less heavy. It was one of those rainy mornings again, the kind where the city seemed wet and gray, and everyone hurried along, keeping their heads down to avoid the drizzle. The girl adjusted her backpack and hurried along the sidewalk, careful not to slip on the wet stones. She noticed the garbage man coming down the street with his cart, soaked from the rain, but still moving steadily. This time he called out a friendly good morning with a voice that carried over the rain. Her heart skipped a beat, and she whispered a quiet good morning back, surprised at how her voice sounded even to her own ears. For the first time, she felt like someone actually cared, like she was more than just another face in the crowd. It wasn't a big gesture, and it didn't change her life immediately, but it made the morning feel different. She kept walking, holding the memory of his smile as she entered her school. The classrooms were the same, the teachers the same, the students the same, but she felt a little stronger somehow, a little braver. During lunch, she found herself thinking about the garbage man again. What was his life like? Did he have a family? Did anyone notice him, like he noticed her? She realized that maybe everyone, even adults, could feel invisible sometimes. It made her feel connected in a strange way, like the world wasn't just lonely for her. There were others who went unnoticed, and maybe small gestures of kindness were the only things that could break through the walls. People built around themselves. After school, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets shiny and wet. She walked her usual route home, keeping her eyes on the ground, but secretly hoping to see him again. And there he was, struggling with a heavy bag that had torn at the bottom, spilling some of the garbage onto the street. Without thinking, she stepped forward and helped him lift the bag into the cart. His eyes widened in surprise for a moment, then softened into a gentle smile. He said, "Thank you. That was very kind of you." She just nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she had never felt before. It was strange to feel noticed, to feel needed. From that day, she began to notice him more, not just as a person who passed by, but as someone who cared, even in small ways. Sometimes he would bring her a piece of bread or a snack, knowing she might not have had lunch. Sometimes he would ask how her day went, and she would answer with short sentences. But each time it felt like a conversation. She was learning that connection didn't have to be loud or dramatic. It could be simple, quiet, and still meaningful. One afternoon, while walking together for a few blocks, he asked her about her interests. She hesitated, unsure if anyone would care, but finally whispered, "I like to draw." It was a secret she had kept hidden, afraid that people would laugh or ignore her. His eyes lit up with genuine interest, and he said, "That's wonderful. You should keep drawing." It was such a simple encouragement, but it felt like a lifeline. For the first time, she imagined that maybe her drawings could matter, and maybe someone could see her through them. When she reached home, she found her grandmother lying on the bed, coughing weakly. She quickly prepared some tea and helped her grandmother sit up. Life was still hard at home, still quiet and tiring, but now there was a glimmer of hope. She could see that life didn't have to be completely lonely, that there were people who could make small but meaningful differences. Days turned into weeks, and the girl found herself looking forward to the morning walks. The garbage man was a constant presence, always kind, always patient. Sometimes he shared small stories about his life, about his children, his late wife, the struggles of his work, and she listened, feeling a connection she had never experienced. She began to realize that everyone had stories, struggles, and moments of invisibility. It wasn't just her who felt unnoticed, and that knowledge made her feel less alone. One day, while helping him lift a particularly heavy bag, she stumbled and fell, scraping her knee on the wet pavement. Before she could get up, he was there, steadying her, brushing off the dirt and asking if she was hurt. She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the realization that someone cared enough to notice her fall. She had spent so many years moving through life unseen, and now, for the first time, someone's presence felt protective, comforting, and real. After that incident, she felt braver. She started to speak a little more, to share small thoughts and observations. She discovered that the garbage man never judged her, never rushed her, never demanded anything in return. His kindness was unconditional. It taught her that human connection could exist in its simplest form and still be powerful at school. At school, she began to notice things she hadn't before. The students who ignored her were still there, but their presence didn't feel as heavy. She started to draw quietly in her notebook, sketching the scenes she saw around her, the way the light fell on the buildings, the movement of people in the streets, the expressions of those she observed. Her sketches were small, private, and unseen by anyone else, but they gave her a sense of purpose, a way to express herself without words. One afternoon, after school, the garbage man found her sitting on a bench near the park, sketching. He looked at her drawings and smiled warmly. "These are really good," he said. She felt her cheeks flush. No one had ever praised her work before. He asked if she would like to continue drawing and offered to help her get supplies little by little. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. She felt seen, encouraged, and motivated in a way she hadn't known was possible. The girl began to realize that small acts of kindness, quiet recognition, and patient attention could slowly change a person's life. She had always felt invisible, overlooked, and unimportant. But now she understood that even the smallest acknowledgement could plant a seed of hope. The garbage man, with his gentle gestures and caring words, had begun to change her world. Even at home, life felt slightly lighter. She started to share small details of her day with her grandmother, talking about the walks, the conversations, and the drawings. Her grandmother smiled, sensing a subtle change in her granddaughter. The girl was no longer just moving through life quietly. She was starting to exist in it, to be seen and to matter, even in small ways, as the days continued. The routine of their morning walks became something she looked forward to. She found joy in the simplest interactions: a wave, a smile, a shared word. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't life-changing overnight, but it was real. And for the first time, she felt that maybe she could be a part of the world without fear, without hiding, and without feeling invisible through these small interactions. The girl discovered that human connection didn't need to be loud or grandiose. It could exist in quiet moments, simple gestures, and patient presence. The garbage man, with his consistent kindness, had become her anchor in a world that often seemed indifferent. And with each passing day, the invisible girl began to feel a little more visible, a little more valued, and a little more hopeful for what the future might hold. The weeks passed, and life began to feel different for the quiet girl. Her mornings were no longer just a series of steps through invisible streets. They had become small adventures filled with anticipation. She looked forward to seeing the garbage man, to the little conversations, to the quiet smiles that passed between them. Even the smallest gestures seemed larger now, powerful enough to make her chest feel lighter, her heart warmer, and her thoughts less heavy. She had learned that kindness could be simple and quiet but still transform moments of life. One afternoon, after school, the girl was walking home when she noticed a group of children gathered around a small stray dog. The dog looked thin, hungry, and frightened, and the children were poking at it with sticks, laughing. She felt a surge of protectiveness rise within her, and without thinking, she stepped forward, shooing the children away. The dog looked at her with cautious eyes, and then wagged its tail slightly. She knelt on the wet sidewalk, extending her hands slowly, and the dog cautiously sniffed her fingers. She realized that caring wasn't limited to humans. It could extend to any living thing that needed attention, no matter how small. The garbage man appeared a few moments later, pushing his cart down the street. He stopped when he saw her and the dog. His eyes softened as he looked at her, and he asked gently, "Are you okay?" She nodded, smiling at the dog and then at him. He crouched beside her and said, "You have a good heart. Always remember that." Those words stayed with her long after he walked away. She began to notice that her actions, even the smallest ones, could have meaning and impact. Her confidence grew slowly, quietly, like the tide rising in the early morning. She found herself speaking to people at school, answering questions, and even offering help when someone dropped their books or needed guidance. She wasn't loud or flashy, but her presence was slowly becoming felt. Her drawing skills had also improved. Every spare moment she had, she would sketch quietly in her notebook, capturing the world around her. Sometimes she drew the streets, the people passing by. Sometimes she drew the garbage man as he worked, his expressions, the way he moved with careful precision. She didn't show anyone her drawings. They were private, a world she could control, and a way to express herself without fear. But she felt proud of what she created, quiet pride that no one else needed to validate. One day, she helped the garbage man lift a heavy bag into his cart. He asked about her life at home. She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to share, but then told him about her grandmother, about how sick she was, and how much she tried to take care of her. He listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he nodded and said quietly, "You are strong. Stronger than many who have everything handed to them." Those words, simple and kind, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She realized that strength didn't have to be loud or celebrated. It could be quiet, patient, enduring. She had always felt weak, alone, and overlooked, but now she understood that her resilience was a kind of power. She could endure care and still move forward, no matter how invisible she felt to the rest of the world. At school, she began to engage more with her classmates. Not everyone noticed or cared, but she felt braver. She shared her pencils when someone needed one, helped clean up spilled papers, and even offered her seat to someone who had none. Small acts, unnoticed by most, gave her a quiet sense of purpose. She realized that her world was not only what others sit, was what she created for herself through kindness, patience, and attention to the little details of life. One afternoon, the garbage man surprised her by bringing a small package, a few colored pencils, and a notebook. He handed it to her and said, "Keep drawing. Your work is special, and it should grow." She could hardly believe it. No one had ever thought her drawings were special. She felt a lump in her throat and tears prick her eyes, but she smiled, a real wide smile that reached her eyes. She thanked him quietly, holding the package close, feeling a sense of validation she had never known before. Over the next few days, she began to draw more frequently, capturing not only the streets and the people but her own emotions, the feelings she had kept hidden for so long. Her sketches reflected loneliness, hope, sadness, and small joys, a diary of sorts without words. She found that drawing helped her process life, express herself, and build confidence. Every line, every shade, every sketch was a reminder that she existed and mattered. The garbage man noticed the change in her demeanor, said, "You've grown. I can see it in your drawings and in your walk. There's more strength in you now." She blushed at his words, feeling the warmth of recognition. For the first time, she felt proud of herself in a way that didn't depend on grades, attention, or approval. She was proud because someone had seen her, understood her, encouraged her quietly to become more at home. She shared small parts of her life with her grandmother, telling her about the walks, the conversations, and the sketches. Her grandmother smiled faintly, sensing a shift in her granddaughter. She could see that the girl was slowly opening up, discovering her own voice, and stepping into a world she had once feared. The quiet life they led still had challenges, but it was softened by hope and the knowledge that they were not entirely alone. One rainy evening, she was sitting at the window, sketching the city skyline as the rain streaked down the glass. The garbage man appeared below, pushing his cart steadily through the wet streets. He looked up, waved, and she waved back. Simple connection, a momentary exchange of acknowledgement, filled her with a quiet joy. She realized that life was made up of these small moments, small gestures, that, when added together, could create a sense of belonging, purpose, and happiness. The girl began to take more initiative, helping those around her when she could. She helped the elderly neighbor carry groceries, picked up litter in the park, and even shared her drawings with classmates, receiving smiles and compliments she had never experienced before. Each act, small as it was, reinforced the feeling that she was seen and capable of contributing meaningfully to the world around her. Her bond with the garbage man deepened. He shared stories of his own struggles and triumphs, the lessons he had learned from life, and the ways he had persevered despite hardship. She listened with fascination, realizing that wisdom didn't always come from books or teachers. It could come from everyday people who had lived, endured, and cared deeply. His stories inspired her to keep pushing forward, to remain kind, and to cherish the small victories in life. One afternoon, she and the garbage man were walking along their usual route. They came across a small group of children playing in the street. One child had fallen and scraped a knee. Without hesitation, the girl stepped forward, offering comfort and assistance. She helped the child up, cleaned the wound with a handkerchief from her pocket, and offered words of encouragement. The garbage man watched her with pride, seeing the compassion and empathy she had nurtured through their interactions. That evening, she returned home with a sense of fulfillment. She had helped someone, connected with a stranger, and expressed herself through her art. Her grandmother smiled at her quietly, noticing the glow in her granddaughter's eyes. Life still had its difficulties, but the girl felt empowered in a way she had never experienced before. She realized that strength came from caring, from noticing, and from small acts that could ripple through the lives of others. Through these experiences, the girl learned that life was not only about survival, but also about connection, empathy, and the courage to be present in a world that often overlooked the quiet and the invisible. The garbage man had shown her that even the smallest gestures could create profound change. And she carried that lesson with her in every step she took, every sketch she made, and every life she touched. She was no longer simply a silent girl who passed through life unseen. She was someone who had begun to shape her own story, quietly, with care, and with hope for the days to come. The quiet girl had begun to change, and her life was slowly becoming brighter, though the city around her was still noisy and bustling as ever. Each morning, she walked the familiar streets with a little more confidence, looked forward to seeing the garbage man, not just for the small greetings, but for the moments of connection that had begun to fill the emptiness she had carried for so long. She realized that the world could hold kindness, even in the smallest gestures. And that realization gave her a sense of hope she had never felt before. One day, while walking to school, she noticed an older man struggling to carry a large bundle of newspapers. People rushed past him without helping. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and offered to assist. Together, they managed to get the bundle to his doorstep. The man thanked her with a warm smile, and for the first time she felt the weight of her own small power. She could help. She could make a difference, and it felt good. The garbage man had always said that even the smallest acts mattered, and now she understood that completely. At school, things began to feel slightly different. She still sat at the back of the classroom, but she started raising her hand when she had something to say. The other students noticed, some with curiosity, others with surprise. A few even smiled at her. She had never sought attention, but now she understood that speaking up could be a quiet act of courage. Her confidence grew, not because she wanted praise, but because she was discovering her own voice. Her drawings also took on a new life. She began to sketch the city around her, capturing not just the streets and people, but the emotions she felt. There were drawings of lonely corners, of bustling marketplaces, and of quiet moments shared with the garbage man. Each sketch told a story, and each story reflected a part of her life that had once gone unnoticed. The garbage man noticed her sketches during their walks and praised them gently. "These are wonderful," he said. "They show the world through your eyes. Keep sharing your vision." His words became a quiet encouragement that stayed with her. After school one afternoon, she saw a younger child crying near the park. The child had fallen off a swing and scraped a knee. She rushed over, gently cleaned the wound with her handkerchief, and comforted the child until the tears stopped. The child's parents thanked her, but what mattered most to her was the feeling of being able to help, of being useful. She realized that kindness was contagious, and that a small act could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. The garbage man continued to be a steady presence in her life. He shared stories of his own childhood, the challenges he had faced, the small victories that had kept him moving forward. She listened, captivated, realizing that life had many layers and lessons to teach. He taught her that strength was not always loud or obvious. It could be quiet, enduring, and expressed in the way someone cared for others. She felt lucky to have someone who believed in her, even when the rest of the world overlooked her. One evening, as she walked home, she noticed a stray cat shivering under a bench. Now she knelt down, offering her jacket to wrap around it. The cat slowly approached her, nuzzling against her hand. She smiled, realizing that her compassion extended beyond humans. Life had taught her to care, to notice, and to act, even when no one was watching. The garbage man appeared at that moment, his cart beside him, looked at her and said, "You have a heart that sees what others do not. That is a rare gift." His words warmed her like the sun breaking through clouds. Her grandmother noticed the change in her granddaughter as well. The girl shared small stories about the walks, the drawings, and the small acts of kindness she performed each day. Her grandmother smiled quietly, sensing that the girl had begun to grow, to emerge from her shell, and to believe in herself. Life at home was still challenging, but there was a newfound lightness in their interactions. They laughed more, shared meals together, and found joy in small victories. One rainy afternoon, she and the garbage man walked together through the slick streets. A man had dropped his wallet, and without hesitation, she picked it up and ran to return it. The man was grateful and amazed by her honesty. She realized that integrity, kindness, and courage were qualities she had always possessed but had not recognized until now. Each act, each small decision, was shaping her into someone strong, confident, and compassionate. She also began to connect more with her peers. While some still ignored her, others began to ask her questions, to compliment her drawings, or to seek her help. She responded with kindness and patience, and in doing so, she built bridges that had never existed before. She understood that relationships were nurtured slowly, with small, consistent efforts, and she was willing to invest in them. The garbage man noticed her growing confidence and encouraged her further. He suggested that she share her drawings with a local community center, a place where people could appreciate her work. At first, she was hesitant, shy, and afraid of judgment. But he reminded her, Your work matters because it shows the world through your eyes. That is something no one else can do. She took a deep breath, gathering courage, and agreed to try. Over the next few weeks, she prepared a small collection of sketches, each one a reflection of her journey. She carefully chose pieces that spoke to her experiences, from quiet moments of solitude to acts of kindness and glimpses of hope. The garbage man helped her carry the drawings to the community center. She placed them on the display boards with trembling hands. She stepped back, her heart pounding, unsure of how people would react. The first visitors walked by, some stopping briefly, others lingering to look more closely. A few people smiled and nodded, commenting softly on her talent. One older woman approached her and said, "Your work is beautiful. It tells a story that words cannot capture." The girl felt a wave of pride, gratitude, and disbelief. For the first time, she realized that her perspective, her creativity, and her quiet voice could be appreciated by others. She was no longer invisible. The garbage man watched from a distance, a proud smile on his face. He had seen the journey she had taken, from a silent, unnoticed girl to someone capable of inspiring others with her art and kindness. He knew that this was only the beginning, that life had much more in store for her. But he also knew that she had discovered something invaluable, the belief in herself. Returning home that evening, the girl felt a new sense of purpose. Her life was still filled with challenges, from schoolwork to caring for her grandmother, but now there was a sense of possibility, of hope, and of progress. She had learned that even the smallest gestures, acts of courage, and moments of connection could change the course of a life. She had learned that she mattered, that her voice, her kindness, and her creativity could be recognized and celebrated as she lay in bed that night. She thought about all the people she had met, the lessons she had learned, and the moments that had shaped her. The garbage man's quiet encouragement, the smiles of strangers, the gratitude of those she helped, and the praise of the community center all intertwined to create a tapestry of hope, confidence, and self-worth. She realized that life was not about being noticed by everyone, but about being true to oneself, and recognizing the value in small, meaningful actions. The next morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She prepared breakfast for her grandmother, packed her school bag, and stepped outside into the city streets with a new determination. She greeted the garbage man with a smile, and he nodded in acknowledgement, proud of the progress she had made. Their walks continued, filled with conversation, encouragement, and quiet companionship. With each passing day, the girl became more confident, compassionate, and connected to the world around her. She learned that life's challenges were not insurmountable, that small acts of kindness could ripple outward, and that human connection, no matter how quiet, could change everything. She had discovered her voice, her courage, and her strength, and she carried them with her in every step, every sketch, and every interaction. The quiet girl who had once passed unnoticed through the city's streets was no longer invisible. She was seen, valued, and beginning to shape her own path. And as she walked alongside the garbage man, through rain, sun, and the ordinary rhythms of life, she understood that even the smallest gestures, when given with sincerity, could illuminate the world and bring hope to those who needed it most. The quiet girl had come a long way. Since those first mornings when she walked through the city streets feeling invisible, life was still full of challenges, still filled with moments of uncertainty. But she had discovered something far more valuable than mere recognition. She had found her courage, her voice, and a connection to the world that made each day meaningful. The garbage man continued to be her steady companion, a witness to her growth and a gentle guide through the complexities of life. One morning, as she walked with him along the familiar route, she noticed a group of children playing in a small park. One child had fallen and scraped their knee, crying softly. She approached without hesitation, kneeling beside the child to offer comfort. She cleaned the wound, gave words of encouragement, and stayed until the child calmed down. The parents watched with gratitude, and she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She realized that the ability to care, to act, and to show kindness was a strength she now possessed. and it was one she wanted to share whenever she could. At school, she had become more confident and involved. She raised her hand in class, participated in group activities, and even shared her drawings with classmates. Some were curious, others impressed, and a few still ignored her. But she no longer felt invisible. She understood that being noticed was not the same as being important. Importance came from the actions she took, the kindness she offered, and the growth she experienced. Her art became a reflection of her journey, a silent story that spoke volumes about resilience, hope, and empathy. Her bond with the garbage man had grown stronger over time. He continued to share stories from his life, tales of hardship, perseverance, and quiet victories. She listened intently, learning lessons that could not be found in books. From him she understood that strength was not measured by wealth, fame, or recognition, but by the ability to endure, to care, and to act with integrity. He had shown her that even small, consistent acts of kindness could ripple through the lives of many. One afternoon, he surprised her with a small package, a set of high-quality sketching pencils and a thicker notebook. He handed it to her with a smile and said, "Keep creating. Let your thoughts and feelings flow onto the page. You have a gift." She accepted it with wide eyes and a trembling hand, feeling a wave of gratitude and encouragement. For the first time, she understood that her creativity mattered not just to her, but could inspire others as well. She carried the package home with care, eager to fill it with her visions of the world. Her grandmother noticed the change in her granddaughter and smiled softly. She had always known that the girl had a quiet strength, but now it was visible. The girl shared her drawings, her stories, and her experiences, and they laughed together more often. Life at home, though still challenging, felt warmer and lighter. Her grandmother's gratitude and quiet pride added another layer of support and love, reinforcing the girl's newfound confidence. The day came when the community center invited her to display her art publicly. She was nervous, afraid of judgment, and unsure if people would appreciate her work. The garbage man accompanied her, offering steady reassurance. "Your perspective is unique. Share it with courage," he said. His words gave her the strength to place her drawings on the display boards. Step back and wait for the world to notice. Visitors began to wander past her work. Some stopped briefly, others lingered, and a few complimented her, asking questions about her techniques and inspiration. One older woman said softly, "Your art tells stories that words cannot express. Thank you for sharing it." The girl felt a mixture of pride, relief, and disbelief. She realized that her life, her experiences, and her creativity could touch others in meaningful ways. She was no longer invisible. Her story, expressed through her art and actions, had found an audience. After the exhibition, the girl and the garbage man walked home in silence. She felt a quiet joy that was deep and fulfilling. He smiled at her, understanding the significance of the moment. "You've come far," he said. "This is just the beginning. But you've shown that small acts, patience, and courage can open doors you never imagined." Her days continued with a balance of school, home responsibilities. In her art, she helped her grandmother, assisted classmates, and continued her daily walks with the garbage man. Each interaction, each sketch, and each act of kindness reinforced her sense of purpose. She realized that the world was not just about surviving unnoticed. It was about creating meaning, spreading compassion, and nurturing connections that could transform lives. One day, while walking through the city streets, she noticed a woman struggling to carry groceries. Without hesitation, she offered help. The woman smiled warmly and thanked her, and the girl felt the same satisfaction she had when helping the child in the park. Each act of kindness, each moment of connection became a thread weaving together a life filled with purpose, empathy, and self-respect. As she matured, her art gained recognition beyond the community center. Local newspapers featured her work, highlighting her talent and her story of resilience. People admired her ability to convey emotions through simple sketches, and she began to understand that her voice, once silent, could now reach far beyond her immediate surroundings. Yet she remained humble, knowing that her growth was nurtured by countless small gestures of kindness and encouragement. she had received along the way, the garbage man remained her constant companion, a reminder of how small acts of care could ripple outward. He continued to share wisdom, stories, and encouragement, never seeking recognition for himself, but always proud of the girl he had quietly supported. She realized that true friendship and mentorship were not about fame or reward, but about consistent presence, understanding, and belief in another person's potential. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, she and the garbage man sat on a bench overlooking the city. She sketched the skyline, the people, and the quiet moments of life unfolding before them. He watched silently, proud of how far she had come. She glanced at him and said softly, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." He nodded, his eyes warm, and replied, "You were always meant to be seen. I just helped you believe it." Through the years, the girl continued to grow into a confident, compassionate, and creative young adult. She helped her grandmother, nurtured friendships, and inspired those around her with her art and actions. She had learned that life was not about the recognition of the many, but about the authenticity of one's actions, the courage to be kind, and the ability to connect with others on a human level, the city streets that once made her feel invisible now felt alive with possibility. She walked them with purpose, carrying the lessons, love, and encouragement she had received. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she was prepared to face them with strength, empathy, and courage. She had discovered that even in a world full of noise and indifference, one could create meaning, touch lives, and inspire others through simple, consistent acts of care. And as she walked beside the garbage man, through rain, sun, and the ordinary rhythms of life, she realized that the smallest gestures, the quietest words, and the gentle acts of kindness could change a life forever. She was no longer the silent girl who everyone passed by. She had become someone who saw, who acted, who cared, and who inspired. She had found her place in the world, not by demanding attention, but by embracing compassion, courage, and connection. And in that, she found the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that she mattered truly and deeply to the world around her.